It started like any other quiet Sunday morning, until the sound of police sirens shattered the peace. For Miles Jenkins, that ranch wasn't just land, it was legacy. 50 acres of open fields, rolling fences, and an old oak tree that had seen more sunsets than most people see in a lifetime. He'd built the place with his own hands, one post, one nail, one dream at a time. After 2 decades in corporate real estate law, Miles had walked away from boardrooms and burnout to live a quieter life. Here, the air smelled like cedar and honesty. The only sounds were the wind brushing the grass and the low hum of cattle in the distance. That morning, the world felt still. Miles stood on his porch, coffee steaming in the cold air, wearing that easy half-smile of a man who'd finally found peace. He'd grown up in the South, where land was more than property, it was identity. And every morning when he watched the sun rise across the ridge, he felt grounded in something real. But lately, that peace had been slipping through his fingers. Ever since the new subdivision had popped up next to his ranch, trouble had been inching closer, led by a woman named Karen Whitmore. She was the self-appointed queen of the HOA next door, famous for sending violation notices if someone's mailbox leaned half an inch too far or if their lawn wasn't perfectly trimmed. Karen was the type to measure power by how many people she could intimidate. Clipboard in hand, oversized sunglasses, that fake smile that didn't reach her eyes. She was always just checking on community standards. The irony? Miles' land wasn't even part of her HOA. It was private property, untouched by their rules or nonsense. But that didn't stop Karen from crossing that line, literally. Every week, she'd wander to the fence with her phone out, snapping photos of his animals, his old pickup, his storage shed. At first, Miles laughed it off. He knew who he was. He knew what was his. But lately, her attitude had changed, from nosy to hostile. And that morning, as she stood at the edge of his property on the phone, eyes narrowed and lips curling into a smile, Miles felt something in his gut. Something told him, this time, she wasn't just calling to complain. She was calling for backup. The sound came first, a slow crunch of gravel under heavy tires. Miles turned, coffee cup still warm in his hand, and saw 2 patrol cars creeping up his driveway. Blue and red lights flickered against the white fences, bouncing off the side of his barn. His stomach sank. "You've got to be kidding me." He placed the mug down on the porch railing and stepped forward, calm but confused. The lead officer stepped out, tall, cautious, one hand resting near his holster. Another followed, scanning the property like they were entering a scene from a crime show. "Morning, officers," Miles said evenly. "Something I can help you with?" The first cop glanced at his notepad. "We got a call about a possible trespasser. Neighbors said someone's been living here without permission." Miles blinked. "Without permission? This is my house." Before he could explain, a familiar, grating voice chimed in from behind the fence. "That's him. That's the man I was talking about." Karen Whitmore strutted toward them like she'd been waiting for her moment under the spotlight. Sunglasses on, hair perfectly sprayed, clipboard tucked under one arm. "Officers, I told you, he's been here for weeks. The real owner must be away. Look at the state of this place. Those animals, that old truck, it doesn't meet HOA code." Miles took a slow breath, jaw tightening. "Karen, for the last time, I don't live under your HOA. This is Jenkins Ranch. Private property. Has been for 50 years. Karen crossed her arms, faking a sympathetic look. "That's what he keeps saying. But, you know, these scammers, people pretend to own land all the time." The officers exchanged looks, uncertain, but listening. One of them stepped closer. "Sir, can we see some ID?" "Of course," Miles said, pulling out his wallet, hands steady though his blood boiled beneath the calm. They studied it carefully, but their faces didn't relax. "Not fully." Karen wasn't finished. "And check the vehicle registration. That truck hasn't moved in days. And those animals, look at that fencing. Total violation of Section 8A. Miles turned toward her, eyes steady. "Section 8A doesn't apply here. You don't have jurisdiction." She smirked. "We'll see about that." Miles stared at her for a long second. The wind blew hard across the field, carrying tension instead of peace. He'd seen legal fights. He'd seen corruption. But never this kind of arrogance, dressed up as community concern. And deep down he knew this was only the beginning. The air had shifted, tight, heavy, charged with disbelief. One of the officers started walking toward the barn, hand brushing the handle of his flashlight like he owned the place. Miles took a step forward. "Hold on," he said firmly, voice low but unshakable. "You can't just walk into my property like that. Not without a warrant." Karen rolled her eyes. "See? I told you he's hiding something. Probably stolen equipment or illegal animals. That barn's never open." Miles turned slowly toward her, incredulous. "Karen, you have no idea what's in that barn." "Exactly," she snapped. "That's what I'm saying." Her tone had that edge, the kind that comes from people who mistake control for righteousness. The officers hesitated, uncertain. Then one of them said, "Sir, if you have nothing to hide, there shouldn't be a problem with us checking." Miles' patience snapped. "No," he interrupted. "The problem is you think my ownership is negotiable." He pulled his phone from his pocket, hit record, and held it steady. "For my safety," he said calmly. "And for the record, you're trespassing." The camera light blinked red. The whole mood changed. The younger officer stepped back slightly, uneasy now that they were being documented. Karen, though, she doubled down. "Oh, please," she scoffed, waving her papers. "Go ahead and record. I've got HOA authority, and I'm well within my rights to request inspection." Miles turned to her with a slow, measured look that could cut through concrete. "You keep saying authority, Karen, but you don't have any here. This isn't part of your subdivision. This is Jenkins Ranch, my land." Her face twisted. "We'll see what the board says about that." "The board?" Miles said, almost laughing. "You mean the same board that follows federal HOA compliance laws?" He took a step closer. "Karen, do you even know who I am?" She froze, frowning. "Should I?" "I'm Miles Jenkins," he said quietly, "Senior Legal Advisor for the National Homeowners Association Council. The people who write the rules you're trying to use against me." The world went still. Even the wind seemed to pause. The officers looked stunned, caught between embarrassment and disbelief. Karen's clipboard slipped slightly in her grip. Miles looked her dead in the eye and said, "Now tell me, are you still sure you're on the right side of this?" The silence hung thick in the air, heavy enough to cut. The officers stood frozen, eyes darting between Miles and Karen, as if realizing they'd just walked into something much bigger than a neighborly dispute. Miles didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. His calm carried the kind of authority that didn't need shouting. "Since you're both here," he said, pulling up his phone again, "let's clear this up properly." He dialed a number, put it on speaker. It rang once. "Mr. Jenkins?" a professional voice answered. "This is the State HOA Compliance Office. Everything all right?" Karen blinked, confused. "Wait, he's serious?" Miles looked at her, expression cold and steady. "Yes, Karen. I'm very serious." "Would you like us to pull up the Whitmore HOA files?" the voice asked. Miles glanced at the officers. "Please do." Karen's sunglasses slipped down her nose. "Wait, what do you mean, pull up our files?" The woman on the phone replied briskly, "We're seeing several formal complaints of harassment, property boundary disputes, and unauthorized enforcement actions. Is that correct, Mr. Jenkins?" "That's correct," Miles said calmly, never breaking eye contact with Karen. "And it looks like we can add one more today, filing a false police report." Karen's confidence cracked like glass. "I didn't mean, this was just a misunderstanding." The younger officer stepped forward, clearing his throat awkwardly. "Ma'am, you did call us out here claiming this man was trespassing, correct?" "Yes, but he looked suspicious." "You people don't understand." The older cop interrupted. "Ma'am, that's enough." He turned toward Miles, respectful now. "Mr. Jenkins, we apologize for the inconvenience." Miles nodded slightly. "Apology accepted. Just make sure the report reflects the truth." The deputies exchanged a glance, then one of them spoke into his radio, confirming the case as a false report. Karen's face turned pale. This isn't fair. I was trying to protect the neighborhood. Miles took a step closer, his voice calm but cutting. No, Karen. You were trying to control it. The officers escorted her back toward her property line as she muttered excuses no one believed. Miles watched her go, heart pounding, chest tight, but not with fear. With release. For the first time in months, he felt the quiet return. Not the fragile kind, but the kind that comes after a storm finally breaks. A week later, the neighborhood was different. For the first time since the new subdivision had been built, the air around Miles' ranch felt still. No more glares from across the fence. No more cameras flashing at his livestock. Karen's once daily patrols had stopped entirely. Because she was gone. Word spread fast, faster than she could spin it. After the police report became public, the HOA board called an emergency meeting. Turns out, Karen had filed multiple false complaints against other residents too, mostly targeting families who didn't fit her image of community standards. When the state compliance team audited her records, it wasn't just embarrassing, it was disqualifying. She was voted off the HOA board unanimously. Miles didn't celebrate. There were no speeches, no revenge smiles. Just quiet satisfaction and a sense of closure. He spent the next Sunday morning exactly how he always had, on his porch, coffee steaming in his hand, the sunrise brushing gold over the hills. It was almost poetic, the way peace had returned to his land, as if nature itself was exhaling after holding its breath too long. His dog, Jasper, trotted up and sat beside him. Miles scratched his ear absently, eyes on the horizon. He thought about how quickly things could turn, how easily power, fear, and ignorance could twist a simple misunderstanding into something darker. Karen hadn't just called the cops out of suspicion, she'd done it out of something uglier. A need to control. A fear of difference. And deep down, Miles knew she'd convinced herself she was right. That's what made people like her dangerous. He sighed softly. People forget, he murmured, almost to himself. Ownership doesn't mean authority. And authority doesn't mean respect. He thought about all the other neighborhoods he'd worked with, the hundreds of HOA boards he'd helped reform. He'd seen this pattern before. Power in the wrong hands, small rules used as weapons. But this one hit home. Literally. As the sun climbed higher, Miles smiled faintly. Justice didn't always come with noise. Sometimes, it arrived quietly, with the sound of birds, the smell of grass, and a man finally drinking his coffee in peace. He looked toward the fence one last time and whispered, almost like a closing line to the story, "Some lessons come with sirens." If you were in Miles' place, what would you have done? Let me know in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more powerful true stories like this.